he seems just a little distant from his father. Apparently that's not the case. And when he was on the witness stand, he was, testifying about the guns and about, I don't know. I don't want to judge anyone in that position because it sucks being in that position. And granted, I was half his age when I was testifying, but even less than that. It feels like there is still this trauma hold over him, over the son, Buster. That's what I see when I'm looking at this kid. And I'm just like, his father still has a hold. I think it's the guilt and shame of the family.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County history. Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife Noreen and burying her body in the basement of his new home in Erie, Pennsylvania.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
As I heard a scream, I heard a thud. It was about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. This podcast serves as a type of therapy and reconciliation for myself, and it is my hope that it helps anyone who has experienced deception, betrayal, and dark trauma. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Murder. Hey movers, welcome back to another episode of Moving Past Murder. I'm your host, Collier Landry, and what's going on? Happy Friday, February 24th. It is a not so happy day here in Southern California. It is raining, it is very cold, and we had hail last night, and all of the heating units, HVAC units at my building are all frozen over, so there's no heat. Now, I realize a lot of you are in blizzards and things of that nature, but this is Southern California. We are not supposed to have blizzard temperatures, hail, craziness like that. So that has definitely thrown some major salt in my game. And for those of you that don't live in Southern California, or particularly Los Angeles, it is a hairy place to drive in the rain because so many people, I don't know where they come from, when they come to the city, they somehow forget how to drive in the rain. So you add to that all the cold and potentially icy conditions. They've shut down the freeway north of LA. I mean, it's wild. I don't know. These are strange days for sure. Tuesday, February 28th is my birthday, so feel free to reach out, message me. I love hearing from you guys. Really stoked that you guys are all a part of my life as I enter another year into doing this podcast and another year of my life. I'm really, really grateful for it, so thank you for that. I am also really excited to announce that I officially have a Moving Past Murder and Collier Landry official merchandise store on Shopify. You can go to my website, collierlandry.com/store. You can link up, you can buy all kinds of merch for the podcast. I've got some custom designs with my little Chihuahua, Marisol, adding more and more products daily for you guys to check out. I'm going to be offering discount codes for this as well. If you join my Patreon, there's a 10% off code for all your purchases on the online store. So I'm super excited because I've been talking about doing merch for so long, so please check it out. Moving on in today's episode. So to keep up with what's going on in the world, Alex Murdaugh today finished his second day of testimony on the witness stand in his double murder trial. This is such a weird trial because I've been talking about it last couple episodes a little bit, and I've touched upon last week about the intergenerational trauma in the family and how the shame and all of these things, all these factors have really seemed to affect not only this family, but this case and obviously everyone around them, right? And there was just another documentary released a couple of days ago on Netflix, a docuseries about the Murdaughs again, which wasn't that much different from the previous one that I had seen, Murdaugh's Low Country, the Murdaugh Dynasty on HBO Max. But it did have like an interesting twist, which was this reporter that was added to the whole mix who was sharing some details. And one of the things so let me take this back a little bit. One of the things I've become really interested in this case in particular is the family, right? And of course, this is a mother who was murdered by the father, so the parallels are a little eerie. I think this guy's probably a narcissist and maybe even a little bit of a psychopath. I think probably. But I also think there's another factor that comes at play that I don't know if anyone's really talking about or not, but I'm going to get to that in a second. So for me, this week, his son Buster testified on his defense, which was sort of odd. I don't know if he was being prevaricative or not. I had said in a few episodes ago that when I watched that HBO documentary, he's talking to his father at the end of the docuseries, and the new one on Netflix, spoiler alert, ends the same way with a phone call from his father from jail. But he seems just a little distant from his father. Apparently that's not the case. And when he was on the witness stand, he was, testifying about the guns and about, I don't know. I don't want to judge anyone in that position because it sucks being in that position. And granted, I was half his age when I was testifying, but even less than that. It feels like there is still this trauma hold over him, over the son, Buster. That's what I see when I'm looking at this kid. And I'm just like, his father still has a hold. I think it's the guilt and shame of the family that is, again, this intergenerational trauma that I was speaking about before, which dates back to Randolph Murdaugh the first and this supposed train accident that they think is potentially a suicide. I mean, there's so many. This is the interesting thing. There's like 2,000 people in this small town. So, of course, rumors run rampant, right? Especially in today's day and age, right? You have the internet and all these things fueling. But it's interesting, but there's a couple of things that really stuck out in my mind. And this reporter was saying something to the fact of, very shortly, and I remember seeing this on the other documentary because they mentioned it, and I've heard it mentioned, and I've been talking with friends about this case, is that when the murders happened, the police came out and said publicly there's no danger to the public and no one should be worried. This was a couple of days after the murders. Now, they didn't have a suspect in custody. So what I think is really weird is if you don't have a suspect in custody in a double murder in this small town, how is that not a threat to public safety? That's a weird thing to have happen. And I realize that Murdaugh wasn't formally charged with these murders until, I believe, June of 2022. He was already taken into custody at the end of 2021 because of this financial stuff right after he got out of rehab for having an opioid addiction, which is what I want to kind of get into here in a minute. But so one of the things that when I think about this case that I don't know if is really being talked about a lot, because everybody keeps saying, oh, he had this opioid addiction and oh, how could he spend all this money on pills and everything? This is the thing. When you are an addict, you will do anything you can to get your drugs. Now, I know that some people might think it's far-fetched for someone to murder their wife and their son, but I know that there was a confrontation about pills. They knew he was an addict. There was, I believe, text message sending, mom found the pills, we need to talk. But when you are an addict, and we have seen this with the opioid crisis, like this is what I don't understand that people don't seem to get. We have watched the opioid crisis completely ravish this country, especially in the Midwest where I am from. It has just done major damage on communities, families, individuals, businesses, so much so that people just do everything out of character to get their fix. You're talking about people that get injured on a job, that begin taking these pills, they get cut off from these pills, they then start to graduate to heroin, and then it becomes fentanyl, and then it destroys their lives, takes up all their money, and they're spiraling into addictions that are costing them sometimes thousands of dollars a day to take these pills, especially when you can't get them. And they're illegal, the illegal market for this type of stuff. And there's supposed to be, there was a FDA diversion program that was supposed to really regulate how these pills come in to the black market. It's supposed to go from the facility where it's manufactured to the pharmacy to the customer, right? And that obviously is not the case because people are able to get these and sell them on the black market. So, and there's a long history of this in this country with people abusing prescriptions and doctors abusing the writings of these prescriptions and prescribing just tons of pills to these people, right? And that's created a problem. But this is all, in my opinion, this is a real consequence of the opioid epidemic. Because now you have a guy, and I believe that if he did commit this crime, which he's on trial for it, and look, everybody's screaming about justice and if he's guilty, he's not guilty, things of that nature. Well, you have to think, bear in mind that during the trial yesterday when he was testifying, he completely admitted to stealing all this money and robbing all these clients and abusing his power at his law firm, PMPED, pimped. And he admitted to all that. So one way or another, if he goes to jail for these murders, which is just really, really tragic and unfortunate, he's most certainly going to jail for these other crimes that he committed because he's supposed to go on trial for those next. So he just admitted in court that he committed those crimes. I mean, this whole thing is just so weird, and it leads me to think back to like my father's trial, and I was discussing this with someone yesterday of that time around all this conjecture just begins flying in and around the communities, the small town communities of what happened, who was doing this, and now there's a lot of talk about potentially, was he getting pills illegally? Was he somehow involved potentially? Because there's these checks that have been written to this, cousin Eddie, essentially for $50,000 at a time. Was he paying someone who was extorting him? Was he somehow involved in a business that was selling these pills illegally? I don't find that too far-fetched of a hypothesis in this scenario. Because if you're trying to get your drugs, and that is your 100% complete and utter, that is why you are literally functioning right now to take money to consume drugs because you are an addict. Absolutely. Everything else becomes secondary to those drugs. That's why it's called addiction. That's why you see people destroy their lives this way. Could he have committed a double homicide of his wife and his son? I most certainly hope not, but yeah, he could have. If you're a drug addict and someone's standing in the way of you getting your fix, you will do anything. I remember when I went back to my small town, Mansfield, Ohio, somebody was talking to me. A friend of mine works at a bank. It's called Mechanics Bank. And she said to me, we're getting two robberies a week or whatever, because addicts were coming in. This is back, I think, in like 2017, 2018. And just talking about the robberies that were happening, or just the crazy stuff that people were doing. And because they're addicts, because they're addicted, because they're trying to get their fentanyl problem. And so I'm not trying to take any onus or responsibility off of Alex Murdaugh, or however you pronounce his name. What I am saying is that he's clearly was an addict, for sure. And his behavior could have led him to do a number of things. I don't put it past him at all to do this. But I wonder why people aren't talking about this more, because that is and maybe it's just really uncomfortable because people don't want to be like, oh, well, this person, they can't handle their drugs or they can't do this. Well, yeah, but also when you listen to this Netflix documentary, all they're talking about is also the drinking and the boozing and the partying that the family did. So you have a long history of substance abuse in the family, clearly. And I realize some people can handle their liquor, some people can, but they're giving it, according to this documentary, they're giving it to teenagers, the girlfriends of the boys, and they're all underage. Obviously, this boating accident happened when they're all underage, and they're all intoxicated out of their mind. And it led to the death of this young woman, this Mallory Beach. And I think to myself, why didn't anybody talk about that too? Why doesn't anyone talk about the really glaring effects of what may have caused all of this behavior? Because he obviously admitted that because of his drug addiction, he was stealing money. Not only to fuel that, but also he admits to fueling this wealthy lifestyle. But also, if you are a drug addict and something is standing in your way, you are going to do whatever it takes. I hate to beat this point over and over and over again. But this needs to be a larger conversation, because we've already seen this so much in our society. We've seen it just ravage communities, individuals, businesses, just people in general as a whole. And to then see that this is what I believe, this is my conclusion that I've come to, this is the cause of all his behavior. It just boils down to this addiction. I totally believe that he could have committed murder. And the number one question that I get from people all the time was, was your father an alcoholic? Oh, was your father a drug addict? Because they're looking for a way to justify his behavior. Unfortunately, he was not. He was just a psychopath. But he just did it all because he's a narcissist and a psychopath, and it's all about him, and he thought he could get away with it, murdering my mother. This guy, and everybody's saying, he's so just kind of homely and kind of like a bumpkin. I think it's all drug fueled, man. I really do. It's a really sad thing. Anyways, another sad thing is we are in the second anniversary now, starting the second year of the Ukraine-Russia war, which I got to be honest with you. I look at this, I read about it. There are several listeners in this audience that live in Ukraine, and my heart goes out to you guys and what you're dealing with. There's so much surrounding this whole thing I won't even really get into, but I don't see an end in sight. This is dangerous. This is a really scary time if you live in Europe, I think, in a lot of ways, because you're also looking at people who you have to, this is interesting. So we were doing a live meet and greet on my Patreon, which I do them every month on my Patreon. If you're a member, I do live meet and greets where you guys can interact with me, and it's super cool. And she said to me, I don't understand. I live in Australia, and I don't understand all of these school shootings in the United States. And weren't you guys supposed to put metal detectors in there years ago after Columbine, all these things? And I said, well, there are metal detectors in schools now. And she said, well, wasn't it supposed to be everywhere across the country in every single school? And I was like, well, but there's also budgets and there's taxes that fund school systems. And I think a lot of people understand how that works. And when you're not in a big city, you might not have those metal detectors. But the point that I wanted to drive home to her was, just because there's metal detectors doesn't mean that somebody can't carry in a gun to a place. That doesn't deter anyone. What deters people is either fear of going to jail, fear of dying, fear of death, your own concern, your own self-destruction. So therefore you won't do really bad things. That you are not blinded by this just complete self-absorption to just commit this mass destruction, that you go, yeah, I'm going to have some restraint. I'm not going to do that. Like, that's what we hope that a healthy person does in these situations, right? When I think back to this, and I think back to my father's obviously unhealthy behavior, right? He was going to murder my mother no matter what, because he wanted to take him with her to his new house in Erie, Pennsylvania, and live his life with his new girlfriend and the children and all these things and a new baby, and start this new medical practice, and she would be there right underneath his feet. The very definition of a psychopath. That is somebody that does not care about the rule of law. And I think when you look at this war that's going on in Ukraine, you very much have the same type of thing going on. That it appears that people are stuck in the long haul for this war because they don't care about the consequences. It's come hell or high water. And I feel like that's got to change somehow. And I feel that this really got heightened during the pandemic, when people were like, I guess maybe the mentality is, we're not going to live now. We have this horrible pandemic, so we might as well do whatever we want. Loot places, rob, steal, commit acts of violence against one another. It's a lot of the same argument with the police. And people were talking about police brutality, especially against people of color, and doing things with, unchecked power or and protections. It's all the same thing. Whether you're using it in like a drug-fueled rage to commit a crime, to get your fix, or whether you're doing it because you feel that you're entitled somehow to be able to commit these crimes, or that you feel that you are the only authority that can do this, the vigilantism, I don't know what you call it, but it's a real problem. And I think about this a lot in relation to this Murdaugh case, for example, and I talk about the intergenerational trauma. That's one of the things that I've always tried to, especially with this program and doing my film, A Murder in Mansfield, and try to share with people. You have a choice whether you choose to carry on this generational trauma or not, whether you choose to carry on this trauma that you've been through and inflict this pain on others. It all starts somewhere, right? It all starts either when you're abused as a child, whether you go through traumatic experiences, or you've just been through a massive traumatic experience as an adult, and then you inflict that pain on others around you. But you always have a choice to say, I'm not going to continue to carry on this way. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel it's right. That's the choice that I tried to make. And I say in the description of this podcast, so many people have been through massive amounts of trauma. But it's not what the trauma that ultimately defines you. It's what you choose to do about it that does, and how you carry on, how you move past it, right? And I see, looking at the Murdaughs, right? I see this intergenerational trauma. I see this affecting decisions. You see this guy's drug abuse leading to poor decisions that lead to, and whether or not Alex Murdaugh committed the crime of murder against his wife and his son, his behaviors sure as hell led to that. I mean, there's no question. His behavior led to that. And I'm not saying that caused someone else to murder his family as a vendetta or anything like that, but there is it's like I always say, you reap what you sow. You really do. And you see these things in life that make you go, yeah, I need to live better. I don't want to be that person. And I think that was for me, that's what started when I was a kid, and this whole journey was like, I don't want to be that guy that my father is. I want to look in the mirror and go, okay, I'm not that guy. And it took me so long to get there. People often ask me when when they watch the film and they don't quite understand that all of that was leading to me trying to find an answer for why my father murdered my mother. And my process of going through all of this and trying to really, really, really process what the murder, my family's involvement, my family's lack of involvement in my upbringing after the murder, me living in foster care, then being adopted, and all these things. But again, comes down to choice. And I hate to sound repetitive about this, but I think for me, I was always trying to find answers to how moving on was going to look. I mean, this podcast is a big part of that, right? You guys listen in because you're examining my process of processing all of this. And that's why it leads me to even uncover these letters from my father and these tape recordings of interviews that he's done over the years. And when even the smear campaign he started against my mother after he murdered her, after he was in prison. That's a big thing with narcissism that we talk a lot about, is that they start the smear campaign. They rally everyone around the person in order to discredit them, in order to shift the ground underneath the feet that they're walking on to make them look like the bad person, right? Because I think ultimately that suits the narrative that they're trying to create. Because if they can make them look like the bad person, then they're not the bad person, right? They're justified in whatever they did. I don't know if this Alex Murdaugh is that person or not. I don't know if he may be a psychopath, but I think a lot of it is really drug fueled, because there's not that moment of where you see this entitlement. Well, they deserved this. It just might have been in his mind that he can't handle. And maybe even he himself was thinking about committing suicide. There's some real things to take away from this trial, because now, I think the defense is getting ready to rest, and there's a lot of things. And he obviously admits guilt for committing these financial crimes, which is, again, going to send him up the river for probably a really long time if he doesn't go up the river for this murder. So as I keep looking at this case and watching these documentaries, I come to these conclusions that, I'm not exactly sure if he's a psychopath, a cold-blooded killer, or he's just a victim of the circumstances of this intergenerational trauma, of the cycle. No one says, I'm going to stop these behaviors, because why would you? You're getting away with it. You have unchecked power in the county of which your family has held the prosecutor's seat or solicitor's for years. This big law firm, a lot of this wealth that the family generated was from, I believe, a paper mill or something that they had prosecuted. They had taken on all these civil cases against this mill to make money. So they were like the lead firm in all of this. So you're talking about a span of a really, really long time, of 100 years-ish, of absolute power and corruption. And I know I'm probably late to the party in saying this, but I think about that in relation to my own case and what I've been through, and thinking about my father and all this. But look, again, it doesn't really matter what I think. It's what you guys think. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's a psychopath? Do you think that he is just a victim of just a quagmire of just always being able to get away with whatever you wanted, and then this addiction fueling all of that? I don't know what the answer is. I mean, we're going to find out really, really soon, but at the end of the day, there's no reason for any of this. There's no reason for it. You can all choose to break the cycle of what this looks like. somebody can say, you know what? The buck stops here. I'm done. I'm moving past this. I hope that's what Buster Murdaugh chooses to do. I don't know. It's a weird thing. So anyways, I digress. We'll see how all this plays out. Tuesday, February 28th is my birthday, so feel free to reach out, message me. I love hearing from you guys. And check out my new merch store, collierlandry.com/store, official merchandise for this podcast. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Murder. Thanks, y'all. This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible. Find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Collier Landry. The film A Murder in Mansfield is available on Investigation Discovery, Discovery Plus, and Amazon Prime Video. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio. Innocent.